Let's bring in our dream team. We've got with us HLN legal analyst, criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson joining us. Also, radio host and former criminal prosecutor Dan Shore joining us as well. And this is always a touchy subject, right, when we talk about juveniles because, hey, they're just kids. We can't lock them up forever. But there's a big difference between forever and just 50 days for 29 serious violent offenses here. Joey, what's the solution?
You know what? It's a really difficult scenario, and I know you like to focus on victims all the time, and when you look at the victims here, it's just tragic. A dad-to-be, just newlywed. It just has all the makings of something that just tears at your heartstrings, and it's just deplorable. We could talk about a lot of things, Vinny. We could talk about it starting at home. We could talk about schooling. We could talk about socializing and friends and being with the right people, so that a person like this, if you can call him that, is not created to do such heinous things. And then finally, Vinny, to get to the point you were making earlier, because I know viewers are concerned about the death penalty issue, it can't be imposed. Roper versus Simmons, of course, 2005 United States Supreme Court case. If you're under 18, you're not eligible to the death penalty. So I hope there are solutions so that people are not looking like this and grinning and mugging for the cameras after they do something so heinous. But certainly there needs to be punishment imposed. It has to be severe, and it has to deter other people from engaging in this vicious criminality.
Dan, I spent time in the juvenile system, not as a juvenile delinquent, but as a prosecutor, and I know that there's such limitations on what judges can do, and it's always it's a closed proceeding. You go in, and all you hear about are all the problems that the child has. That this is, he's had this tough break, that tough break, but there's a whole bunch of victims along the way. Here, though, you're talking about 29 different times in there. When does our system wake up and say, okay, something's got to be done? Okay, yeah, you want to help a child, but you got to protect the rest of society.
Right. There's two separate issues here. One is at one end of the spectrum where you have people who just make mistakes in their youth, and you don't want them to have their whole lives ruined because they committed what might be a minor crime. At the other end of the spectrum, you have serious public safety threats who are repeated violent offenders who are under the age of adulthood, but they need to be treated like adults when they are hurting people, hurting adults, killing adults or children. Here, this person is seriously threatening society, destroyed a family, killed a dad to be here, and he can't be treated the same way we treat someone who might have committed a minor crime, and we don't want them to ruin their lives because they're too young.
Fired Up Friday. Everybody's fired up about these two stories we covered this week. Some really extreme bad parenting. Hashtag on the case. We bring back in Joey Jackson and Dan Shore. Let's get right to what they're saying online. Caitlin's mom, 80. The brother was doped up and so high. Good dad, my foot. That was horrible, and the dad needs a wake-up call. Dan, to me, that's an obvious one, right, about this father?
Absolutely. It's horrible. It's tragic. There's just no common sense, and there's such cruelty to kids that instead of loving them, there's this apathy at best and cruelty at worst, where you just don't care about the welfare and how these kids are going to grow up knowing right from wrong if this is what they're seeing from their adult supervisors. That's
right. At some point, these kids end up being parents themselves. Linda Kin, VT. Totally bad parenting and abuse on both cases. Sick. Disabled. Parents aren't acting like parents anymore. And what's going on, Joey? What is going on?
It's just horrific because, if you as you point out, the reality is that they'll be parents themselves. And what do children do? What is learned behavior? So what do you become? You become what you are taught to become, and that's a monster. And it's outrageous. It's ridiculous. It needs to stop.
Absolutely. Lorleen Douglas, the 4-year-old and any other children need to be taken away from that family. That is crazy to tie a child to a tree. Bad parenting for the pot, child abuse, neglect, harm for the beating, and finally, abuse. They need to be loved and protected. 17-mile chase, but the guy behind the wheel has Alzheimer's, over 70 years old. Let's bring in the dream team to talk about this one because now his family is suing the police, Mike.
So the police are supposed to know that the person they're chasing, who could be armed, may not be armed, is a 72-year-old guy driving a dangerous weapon the wrong way, putting other people in lives. They're supposed to know that he has Alzheimer's?
Yeah.
How so?
Let's go to the lawyers. Dan, is there a case here?
It seems like a tough case here because, as Mike just said, the police don't know. They tried nonviolent ways to stop him. He's seriously threatening other people. We've seen cases where wrong-way drivers have hit other vehicles and killed people. They try to seemingly take all these different steps to stop the car, and they can't do it. Is there an imminent threat at the time that they shoot? It seems like it.
Yeah, Joey, and I feel bad for the 72-year-old guy. I feel bad for his family and everything else. But it's a dangerous, dangerous situation. Police have no idea what they're coming up against.
Yeah, that's true, and I usually am at odds with my good friend Mike Brooks over police behavior, but this one we're in accord. I mean, the reality is there's something also, if you add up what Dan says and what Mike says, he's also going the wrong way, endangering a whole bunch of other people. And so what about the fact that if he continues to go, other people could die because he could hit them head on? And that, too, is a very compelling point, and so I think it's a tough case to make for the family that the police need to be sued as a result.
What's going through a police officer's mind at the moment that you're approaching the car after the 17-mile chase, Mike?
You know, I'm approaching this car. There's no such thing as routine traffic stop. 17 miles. Hey, who is this person? Is this person wanted? Does this person have a gun? How many people are in this vehicle? These are all things that are going through your mind as you're approaching this and trying to make sure that this vehicle doesn't hit somebody and kill them. Look at the accident in California last night. 10 people killed, head-on collision. This could have happened here.
Yeah, and thankfully, I guess everyone's okay at this point. But again, you just look at that video and you can see how dangerous the situation was, and you don't know what's going on. Two things about this cross-examination. One, I think that's very important, is the little details. He doesn't let Pistorius get away with anything. He calls him on those little details. That's fantastic. The other thing is the difference in the way and the things that attorneys can get away with in South Africa, because he's basically testifying in front of the court. Let's bring back in the Dream Team. Also, hashtag on the case, your comments. But, Joey, how much would you like to cross-examine someone in South Africa?
It would be a wonderful thing. If we did that here, we'd be in contempt of court, right? I'd be behind the jailhouse eating bologna sandwiches. But the reality is it's good and it's effective because, as you mentioned, the devil's in the details, right? And so when you evaluate a story, does the story make sense? Is it reasonable? Is it rational? And if it's not, then you have to be held accountable for it. And to this point, certainly the story, at least Oscar Pistorius' story, appears to be falling apart.
Joel the Third, here's what he says. Prosecutor is doing excellent. He is tripping Oscar Pistorius all up and making Oscar Pistorius' version defy logic. That's huge. Here's Ginger Denise 04. Pistorius is really losing it on the stand, losing credibility and losing his well-practiced mask. That's interesting as well.
And, you know, when he starts to get tripped up, that's when he starts to get emotional. And I think he starts to the tears just to try to stop and, kind of beg for mercy a little bit, but just to kind of break it up.
L belonged to him. This is great. From the infamous words of Judge Judy, if it doesn't make sense, it's not true. On the case. Lita, 30, Georgia, or GA. Who gets shot and doesn't scream out in pain? He didn't want to hear her scream. He just wanted her dead. He is guilty for sure. Wow. And Dan, that's the thing. We have 4 different witnesses heard a female screaming. He heard nothing.
Right, absolutely. He had to take the stand because it's the only way to get his story in front of the judge, but it can't withstand cross-examination. And it's fascinating to hear the lawyer tell him that he doesn't believe his story. As Joey said, you can't do that in America. He's basically summing up while he's cross-examining this witness and saying what he believes and what's not credible.
Yeah. I put to you what you're saying, Mr. Pistorius. It's impossible. You are lying. Just admit it.
Yes, my Vinny.
It makes no sense.
Right.
So Dan, when you're looking at this case and someone's on death row, a lot of people say, oh, it takes forever, it takes forever, it takes forever. That's the way our system's built, because you want to make sure that when you do give the ultimate penalty to a criminal defendant, you've dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and make sure you're getting it right.
Right, and this seems like a case of overwhelming guilt, but we've all seen cases where someone was on death row and evidence came out showing that they weren't guilty, or there was some procedural problem and the case was overturned. We want to make sure that certain crimes are punished in the just way, but it takes time for appeal so we could really make sure the conviction was obtained lawfully. I know that can be frustrating, especially for the family of the victim, but it's part of our legal system.
Yeah. So basically, a confession left in the house, Vinny, you were able to connect it to Benny. So, you know, in this case, I doubt if there's any question whatsoever.
And I'm not so troubled by how long it takes to get to the point of execution because while they're awaiting it, they're on death row. And life on death row is much different than life in general population.
Yep.
All right, the prosecution poked some holes. Quite a few holes in Oscar Pistorius' testimony today. We're going to take a look at those holes next. My goodness, it's the middle of the night. You're there with your girlfriend, the love of your life. You tell her to call 911. Wouldn't she say, hey, why am I calling 911?
Right, absolutely. It defies all common sense, and it has from the beginning, because there's no logical explanation for shooting into a locked bathroom door, believing your girlfriend's inside, without first trying to ascertain where she is. And one of the biggest questions the prosecutor asked was the question of why. Why did you think an intruder was inside? Why did you think an intruder was coming to hurt you? And also showing that he would have been able to call out to her and she would have responded if she was really that close to him in the bathroom. It just defies common sense, and he seems like he's really going down here.